Hey there, welcome to the In the Garage podcast by CarParts.com. I'm your host, Mark DeGrasse, your go-to buddy for all things automotive. From the roar of your weekend project car to the hum of your daily drive, we've got it covered. Whether you're a gearhead who loves keeping your cars, trucks, SUVs, and hot rods in tip-top shape, or you're just dipping your toes in the world of automotive, we promise you a ride filled with knowledge, laughs, and top-notch advice from the industry's finest. So buckle up and let's hit the road together. Today we are with CarPart.com's category manager of a bunch of different categories, Hunter Brabham, and we're talking track and how track kind of works, how to get into racing, kind of the different aspects of racing, and how an individual could kind of get into this aspect of car enthusiasm and maybe make some upgrades to your car. So welcome.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
All right, so why don't we just go into a little bit of your history in racing and kind of, you've built and sold a track car, right?
Sure, yeah, definitely. So growing up, from the minute I could start reading or anything, I was always into cars, and then had a couple of cars early on, and then decided after I crashed one that I needed a faster one. Right?
That's a good lesson.
That's how it always works.
That's how the lesson goes.
So I had made friends with a guy who had a shop, and I bought a old BMW, a 94 325 IS, and decided that we needed to LS swap it. Nice. Because I needed that American horsepower and torque. And then kind of it snowballed from there. That was already a snowball enough.
I was going to say, you started with an engine swap?
Yeah. Yes. So the engine swap happened, and then, wheels, tires, suspension, sway bars, gutting the interior, cage, 6-point harnesses, racing seats. And then, you slowly get to that point where you no longer can drive it on the street with a standalone engine management system and a data analysis system. And then you buy a truck and a trailer to take it to the events. But it was quite the adventure.
That's awesome. So did you start with kart racing or any type of racing, or was it more just you started racing because you liked working on cars?
Yeah. So I actually was very into go-karts early on. One of my friends and I, we would always go to a spot here in Torrance, and on our off days we would go race against each other, and we were both very competitive people. So there were a lot of days we went there in the middle of the day on like non-peak hours, just so we could race each other one-on-one, and always going to see who could get a faster time. And then a couple of times we would get on like the fastest times of the week for the track, and it was great.
Awesome too. So you just, we're having fun.
Yeah, you're having fun, and you like your car, you like driving your car on the street. However, we have speed limits, and while things can get a bit adventurous on a canyon road, sometimes you really want to see the full potential of the vehicle.
No, and I think, and safety is always a concern because
Absolutely.
It's, and I'm not saying I street race on the freeway or anything like that, but It's tempting to go faster. And if you want to go fast, you should go somewhere that's allowed.
Exactly. And it's allowed on the track.
Yeah.
So you can floor your car, you can go, over 100 miles an hour, a lot of cases, depending on the track and your vehicle. So it's just a ton of fun to push that limit, and doing so, there's some things you need to do along the way.
Well, I think you start to realize that, your car could be better, right? Because if you go with a totally stock car and you feel the body roll and you feel the lag coming out of corners and all that stuff, it starts to make you want to fix it.
Exactly. And, you go to the track. I actually went to the track a couple of times before building the track car, and that's, you do all those little things, right? You start and you realize, okay, I need tires with more grip, where maybe they're not good at all for rain, but on the dry track they're going to give me more grip. Or I want to brake harder, so I can go faster and brake later, and then that can give you more time, and through that you'll carry more speed in the corners. So that's like kind of two of the first things you do, right?
Oh, I love the aspect of, because when you get into cars, you just think of fast, right?
Exactly.
You think of speed, horsepower, like, I just need more, versus when you start going into corners and you start, getting into the more technical aspects of driving, you realize, like, maybe less weight is better than more power.
Oh, exactly. And you'll go to these track days like I would go to, and there's guys in Miatas with 150 horsepower, if that, and they're in a small car that weighs probably less than 2,000 pounds, and you're in, a bigger BMW with 350 horsepower, and you're just getting smoked, and it's a very humbling experience.
Well, and I think that's why you get into the classes too, right? Where you're like, okay, maybe this is why there's 10,000 classes of
Yeah.
race. So why don't we just talk about that real quick? Kind of how do the classes work, and why do they exist the way they do?
Yeah, so there's, within these high performance driving events, there's a couple different ways you can go. There's the guys that want to go to the track and just drive the track, to the best of their ability, and that's your HPDE classes. And then there's your actual like wheel-to-wheel racing classes, and those are cool because they'll have some rules and guidelines so that you're competing against similar cars.
Yeah, it makes sense. And that's not just based off of makes and models and years. It's based off of performance specs, right?
It could be it could be based off of just about anything, whatever the organization decides is right for that class. Like for example, there's like some spec BMW classes. Like a big one right now is spec E46. So they take a 2000s 3 Series, and there's a couple of things they can do to them, and then everybody has the same E46, and those are racing against each other. And then there's other classes that are just based off of like power to weight ratio, and maybe a couple of other things, but you could get real nitty gritty into it.
Oh yeah. So before you get to that point, what's kind of the starting point? So say I've done go-karts, I like karting, and I have a car that I think is kind of fast. What can I do with that?
Yeah, so usually the progression will be, you do some karting, and then maybe you have a car like something that you just want to drive fast, right? And you go sign up for an autocross event. They're usually pretty inexpensive. You'll go to like the parking lot in your local football or baseball stadium, and they'll have a course set up. And a lot of people will stop there. There's professional autocrossing where guys are traveling around the country going to different autocross events. And they're specializing in that, and they're usually pretty technical, and I think they're still a lot of fun.
Oh yeah, well, especially what is a fee? Like if you say like, oh, I just want to run my stock Honda Civic and see what it does.
I think depending on where you are in the country, right, that the fee for that could be anywhere from I'd say $50 to $100,
Okay.
and for a day of fun out there, it's definitely worth it. Generally, when you're doing these things, you're gonna spend that on something else, and then you're gonna go home, and you're gonna spend way more on trying to get even faster, right? That's how it always works.
Now, what can people expect? Say I show up to a track day and I, run my car. I know it's going to beat up my tires.
Yep.
But what else is it going to do?
Yeah, so I mean, it's definitely going to tear up your tires. It's probably going to put extra strain on your brake pads, your clutch and clutch fluid and brake fluid. If you have a manual transmission car, brake fluid, obviously for all cars. You're probably going to see some additional wear on some of your bushings and suspension components, and that's when you start really looking to upgrade.
Yeah, well, I think the time is usually the motivation, right? But I can imagine, you just drive a car that has loose suspension and you realize like, oh, I'm really leaning over to the side when I'm turning.
Exactly.
How do I stop that?
Exactly. And in some of the conditions you put yourself in on a track, you realize, oh, like I get a little bit of a shake over 100 or over 120, or I'm turning and I'm loading into my front suspension too much in this corner. Oh, maybe I need a stiffer spring or something.
No, and that's just an awesome way to learn about your car too. Like, when you can apply some of the upgrade, performance aspects and see like, oh wow, it took 5 seconds off my time last time. I mean, nothing feels better than that, right?
Exactly. And what's cool too is they even have little systems you could put in your car so you can monitor your own lap times. And a lot of these tracks, you'll get a transponder, which is a small electronic device you zip tie to your car, and then at the end of the session they tell you all your lap times. So you'll get your lap times, and you're like, oh, like I did a good job on that one. Let me try to beat it on the next session when I go out. That's where the bug gets you.
Oh yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, nothing feels better than doing an upgrade, having it pay off. I mean, it's really gamification of driving, right? Whereas any video game's addictive, where it's like, oh, I get a reward and I feel better, and dopamine hit.
Exactly. And then you start competing with either your friends or all the other guys that are going to these same events, because you start to get ingrained in that community, right? And just like the guys that go golfing together every weekend, there's guys that go to their track days every weekend. You'll see them there week in and week out, and get to know everyone. And that's a very awesome. Good time.
I love that. Now, one aspect that I think a lot of people don't realize about driving is it could be physically tiring, which I always laugh, because if you watch the Drive to Survive on Netflix, and people are like, oh, they're not athletes. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, they have to sit in this little cage for this much time, and they're cranking, and they're, so let's just talk about that real quick. Like, what physical aspects are involved in driving?
Yeah, I'd say there's definitely a more physical exertion needed when you're not harnessed in, because then if you're in your regular like comfort car seat, in that driver's seat, that's not made to hold you in place that well in some of these corners. So you're using a lot of effort not to get thrown into your door when you turn. So being in a harness and in a tight bucket seat, that helps. But then also you need to learn to relax, because sometimes when you're on the straightaway, you'll be pressing the throttle all the way, full throttle, and you can't, when you're driving like that. For me, I always was in the habit of like trying to press the pedal harder, because
go faster.
maybe if I pressed it harder, then I'll get a little bit more out of it and I'll go faster. But you need to tell yourself that no, 100% that's enough, and just needs enough throttle, and then you'll get like sore arms sometimes just from turning and working the wheel so much, and then just like the overall hydration aspect, because a lot of these tracks, they're in the desert. It's hot. The cars are hot, and the engine's getting hot from kind of being pushed to its limit. So that's exhausting as well.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Well, and then all of it, you get out and you're shaking. I used to ride a motorcycle in downtown LA.
Yeah.
And you'd be splitting lanes, and you get literally anywhere, and you feel pretty tired. You're like, those 10 Priuses almost killed me. It's always Priuses.
And then the mental side, right? You're same as if you're driving on the freeway, avoiding cars. You're driving on the track, trying to think about the next turn and what you need to do and what you could do better.
Yeah, well, that's and just in that regards, when you do get tired, I'm sure you make mistakes, and then what kind of damage could you cause your car by, say, screwing up a turn or hitting a curb or any of that kind of stuff?
I mean, you could do damage from as subtle as curbing a wheel to flipping a car. I think it's good to be aware that that's a possibility, depending on where you are, right? Here in Southern California, there's a lot of tracks where there's the track's in the middle of the desert. So when you go off track, it's generally not terrible. You just keep the wheels pointed straight and
ride it out.
Try not to turn out of it, and you'll be fine. Like, I've been off track a number of times, and there's a big dust cloud, and otherwise everybody's okay. Exactly. The trouble you get into sometimes is when you make a mistake mid-corner and you try to save it, and there's other cars around you. I had a friend that was doing that, and he took a corner just a little bit wrong, and it was in the one spot on track where there was the wall, ended up hitting the wall, and he was okay.
Yeah.
It was fine, and something that you see from being at these events enough, but there's still a couple crumpled quarter panels, and some repairs needed.
Then you just hit CarParts.com and you get your little fenders and bumper covers. And
exactly, your replacement control arms.
Oh yeah.
Because that's what'll go, right? Is like the body damage will be the aesthetic part, and then all the underbits that also kind
You
of
can't see them.
collateral damage. Oh, you feel it. You start driving away, and you're like, my steering wheel was not sideways when I started this.
Yeah, that's always fun, and that happens to everybody. Hit a curve, and
yep. Yeah, exactly. It's something that happens, but
well, let's talk about the high level real quick, because we've kind of touched into the karting, and then we got our track days, and then you got your what's that, high performance.
Yeah, so you do your like, if you want to put it in stages, autocross, high performance driving events, amateur racing, and then above that you have your pro racing, your cup cars, your LMP cars, and then pinnacle F1 cars, right?
Oh yeah. Well, and I think some people don't realize how much these cars could be, but like in F1, you're looking at, what, 15 to 30 million per car.
Yeah, like the amount of development work and custom parts that they have. You see the cars come in for a wing change because they hit a blade of grass wrong, and there's $500,000 right there.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, well, and the constant development, that fascinated me, because I had never looked into F1 at all until I saw the show, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is an entire system and a whole organization, and the stuff that actually comes out of the development is maybe like, you almost compare it to like, oh, that's why we set up the space station. Like it was to get this tech.
Yeah.
Because we had to set up a space station. F1 cars are kind of the same way. They're constantly developed.
And they're constantly trying to push the boundaries within their rule set. Like set by the FIA, and they're all competing within these same rules, and it's all about who can find the right loophole or press the limits. And then this year they instituted a cost cap, so they can only spend so much, like between, I think, car development and wind tunnel time and driver fees. So you could get real into it and decide where to spend your money.
Oh yeah, and even the cost cap, because I think it was like 300 million. Is that the?
I don't know the exact number. They'll have to verify that with Google. But there's teams spending over that, or that were spending over that prior to the cost cap.
Yeah, well, and it's good. It's kind of it's why there's so many classes in the amateur and lower levels, because you don't want somebody just spending a bunch of money and beating everybody, right?
Yeah, exactly. And there's certain classes that they'll leave it up to driver talent rather than the car you can build, because, for example, there's these spec classes within like NASA and SCCA where you have a set car or chassis and guidelines, and you can only do like 10 mods to it outside of like safety things, and then everybody's on the same playing field, and it really highlights who the better drivers are.
I love that. Well, and then it's not about like somebody doing a zillion upgrades to a car. It's like, no, it's a 10 upgrades you can do. What do you want to do? So in that regard, what upgrades, like first upgrade, if you do have, say, let's go with the Honda Civic, stock 2010 Honda Civic, you want to get it ready for a track day, what 5 modifications would you recommend?
So I'd probably put them in some categories, right? So you want to do definitely wheels and tires, because you're probably, if you have a stock Honda Civic, you're probably going to need a little bit wider tires with a little bit more of a contact patch, and you're going to want to get a tire made to stand up to a high performance driving environment, and then you're going to want to do some sort of a brake upgrade, definitely brake fluid upgrade, like a Motul 600, and some high performance pads. Otherwise, you'll lose your brakes.
Yeah.
You don't want to press the brakes and have the pedal go to the floor. So wheels and tires, brakes, probably a clutch flush, some seats, harnesses, and a roll bar, because that's going to keep you safe and keep you in your seat. And then after that, you can look into what suspension upgrades you could do, such as sway bars and maybe some coilovers. And that's kind of your basic build, right?
Yeah, it's interesting, the order that you put in too, because I'm sure I never like brake fluid, like that makes a difference.
Oh, it does. And you might have experienced it driving down a mountain. If you're riding your brakes, you notice by the time you get to the bottom of the mountain, like your pedal's just a little bit more spongy, and that you see that on the track. They call it brake fade, and what happens is the brake fluid actually starts to boil. Yeah. So when you get a better brake fluid, it's a higher temp.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, that's fantastic. Well, and that sounds cheaper than, coilovers.
It does. It does. And it's going to be one of those safety aspects. So you can you'll bleed the brakes. You'll do the brake fluid flush and the pads at the same time. And most people can do that on their own.
Oh yeah.
I know when I was first working on cars, that's what me and my dad did, is we changed the brakes on the Suburban.
Oh yeah. That's what I did too. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, actually, that was one of my paid gigs when I
Okay.
was 15 or something. Was like changing out the family's brake pads. I was like,
Oh.
this is good.
They trusted you with that when you were 15?
Yeah, yeah. I guess I did a lot of stuff for a while.
That's
also had to
awesome.
fix the stupid lawnmower all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, this has been great. I think this has been a fantastic intro into it. Definitely gonna have you back, and we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty details of getting into track, because it's something I've always been interested in. But I always thought like, okay, I got to be a zillionaire to afford the tires that I'm gonna need to go through to make this worthwhile. But you don't.
There's an old saying that if you want to become a millionaire, start as a billionaire and start racing.
It's true. It's like, but you have an awesome hobby and a great group of friends.
Ton of fun.
That's all you need. And it's fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
It's the adrenaline going.
yes. And in a safer way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Not totally safe ever, but I'd say better do this than if you're finding yourself street racing, then just look into doing it for real.
Absolutely.
Much
Take
more
it to the
enjoyable.
track.
Yes. Go to the track. All right. Well, thank you so much, Hunter.
Thank
that was
you,
super
Mark.
informative, and we'll definitely have you back soon.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, gearheads and enthusiasts, that's another lap completed here at the In the Garage podcast by CarParts.com. Thanks for taking this ride today. Don't forget to check out CarParts.com for all your automotive needs, because we know you value quality and convenience. Keep those engines purring, stay safe on the roads, and remember, no matter what your automotive interests are, we're here to fuel your passion. Until next time, I'm Mark DeGrasse.